I'm here because I co-edited the book that Angeline and Fiona just mentioned, along with Roshi Naidoo, called Politics of Heritage, the Legacies of Race. And Roshi and I both found it very interesting how people have responded in all kinds of ways to the book. And this has included how people have responded on a face-to-face level with us in terms of how we look. So, for example, there have been times in both formal and informal meetings when people would quite conspicuously talk just to me and not to Roshi, and that happened, for example, at a very wide academic history conference, or talk just to Roshi and not to me, and that was at a council meeting about Black History Month. And then there was also the time when I turned up at the States last year at a conference on heritage, and I was told that I wasn't exactly what they were expecting, because they had been expecting, and I quote, a big black man. So these stories about what people expect and how they interact are obviously telling in all kinds of ways. And for me, they raise two kinds of issues in particular. I mean, they raise lots of issues, but for me, they raise two in particular. And firstly, there's the issue here, I think, about how people respond to us because of what they imagine about our histories, depending on our appearance, or based on our appearance. Because I look very white, and because I have a very English accent, I have all the attendant privileges which go with that. I don't get people asking where I'm from, or questioning my right to be here. I don't experience racism. This is a power dynamic it's very important to be aware of when discussing heritage, race and belonging. Because if it's not highlighted, it can involve what Callie Town has termed dispossessing the dispossessed of their dispossession. And secondly, and at the same time, there's the issue that multicultural heritage is everybody's heritage. So we all have millions of different ancestors, and their histories are all multiple and interwoven. It's not something to ghettoise and parcel off as belonging to the non-white. This would be to practice what Leclerc and Rutledge termed enclave politics. So these two issues can both, I think, be very simple or very complicated to navigate depending on the context. And there are two key issues which have informed my approach in this paper, which is going to consider some of the context issues and debates that have structured the relationship between race and heritage in Britain, both on an explicit and implicit level. So I thought I'd do this by briefly talking about the concepts of race, ethnicity and heritage, and then by summarising some of the different ways in which the relationship between them has been seen as problematic. So race appears in the title of this paper in sneer quotes or scare quotes for a reason, and that's to foreground the status of the term as a historical fiction which has had and continues to have very real and damaging effects. As Peter Osborne and Stella Stamford have put it in their book Philosophies of Race and Ethnicity, race is a concept with a disreputable past and an uncertain future, yet it continues to trouble the present, both politically and intellectually, even whilst today there's a widespread acknowledgement of its lack of objective validity as a principle for the classification of human differences. In other words, there's no objective reason why people should be compartmentalised by their skin colour any more than by the colour of their hair, their height, or the number of teeth or moles they might happen to have. Consequently, today, critics like Paul Gilroy argue against using the term race at all, given its status as invented, essentialising fiction that's primarily been used as an instrument of social domination. Nevertheless, the sheer weight of the historical processes of what Gilroy terms racialisation also means that we've obviously got to take the effects of such historical classifications very seriously. And racialisation has been used as a means of regulating power through the control of people's bodies for a long time, through, for example, slavery, genocide, asylum and social stratification. And there's now a very large body of work tracing these histories and how they came into being, with analysing the genealogies of race. And these span from the emergence of racial classification in European colonialism, its development through scientific, again in scare quotes, Enlightenment rationalities, and through its dissemination through 19th century governmentality and its 20th century resurgences in both racist and anti-racist discourse. So race has got a long history in many different forms as an idea. By contrast with race, we might think about how the emphasis on ethnicity as a term has quite different associations. So ethnicity's emphasis on social and cultural construction meant that it became, for many people, a very preferable term, as the title of Stuart Hall's 1992 essay called New Ethnicities indicates. And ethnicity is usually taken to mean accumulated bonds of identification, whether cultural or social or behavioural or linguistic, which exist between certain groups and which are in some ways connected to either an idea of ancestry or particular geographical areas. So some people see it as very emancipatory, but it can also be a strategy of kind of smuggling in cultural racism through the back door, in a sense. So one kind of very notorious recent example is this book by Samuel Huntington called The Clash of Civilizations. And this basically pits this idea that it's just very natural for the West as a Christian entity to be pitted against Islamic societies. And he basically argues in this book that they're fated never to get on. You know, the kind of terrorism that goes on at the moment is all because these civilizations are so fundamentally different. So some people like Edward Said have said that Huntington is a very good example of how ethnicity becomes racist. You know, ethnicity becomes used to smuggle in racism through the back door. So that's just a note on the terminology of race and ethnicity. Now, the evolution of race and ethnicity have worked together to inform heritage in a variety of ways. And like both of them, heritage is another term with very complex and multiple histories. But again, there are some particular aspects of that history which mean that it's been able to become very interwoven with these ideas about race and ethnicity, with processes of racialisation. So, for example, both the term race and the term heritage were used to shore up the power of the people that defined their meaning and became mutually valorised through ideas of lineage and stock. So in medieval times, heritage was something that religious people had. It was something that you had if you were blessed. And then later on, through industrial capitalism and the formation of the modern nation state, heritage became something that posh people had. You know, it became something that became associated with blood and property, ideas about high culture, land and soil. And this is the formation that Stuart Hall has called the heritage, with a capital T and a capital H. The heritage is something which came to proclaim the cultural and social worth of particular groups at the expense of others, and letting what was deemed important or natural about the past just stand there as self-evident, as obvious, as singular, and as not subject to question, was of one of the means, Hall says, through which heritage got its power. So it becomes powerful precisely because it's deemed as being natural, it's not subject to question.